Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today's guest is a licensed paralegal, a notary public, and an RCIC, and she can tell you about all of those things. So, thank you so much, Rebecca Tripp, here for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time and making this work. We pretty much put this together in like the last couple of days. So, thanks so much for joining. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about all of those things and how you got into law to begin with.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I guess I'll start from the beginning. So, I have my bachelor's in international development studies and history. I then went over to college and completed my paralegal diploma as well as my law clerk diploma. And then after that, I went to Humber College to do the immigration consultant program. So now I have my paralegal license. I'm an RCIC, and I recently just opened up my own law office, combining all the services that I offer.
Okay, so let's start in terms of getting into the paralegal studies to begin with. What was sort of your motive there in terms of let me become a paralegal, and then I guess so. Let's go with that, and then we'll follow up on then switching to the immigration side.
Sure. Yeah. And I know your audience is students as well. So I'm happy to talk about the educational side of things. So I did not plan to be a paralegal at the beginning. When I was doing my bachelor's, I was really interested in immigration law, and I did, international development studies because that was what I really wanted to do. But I realized that I didn't know anything about the law. So though I wanted to work in immigration law, my bachelor's didn't really give me any foundation to move forward with that. So the paralegal program at Fleming College offered a dual diploma program. So the paralegal and law clerk diploma program, first 3 semesters are the same, and then there's 2 different semesters for the final semester. So that way you get the 2 different diplomas. So I originally wasn't planning on becoming a paralegal, but I enrolled in the program and I really liked it. And I used to hate public speaking, and I used to get really nervous about it. And I didn't like the idea of trials and mock trials and stuff. And as 4th semester came, I realized that not only did I like it, but I was actually kind of good at it. And so with that, and with my peers getting ready for the exam, I was like, let's do this. So I wrote my licensing exam, became a licensed paralegal, and then I ended up working in immigration law for a year. Part of the paralegal licensing, as you know, is that you have to complete 120 hours as part of like a placement in order to get your license. So I did that in Toronto, and then I was hired on full time. And I worked at the immigration firm for a year. And I really realized just how much I loved immigration law. And then that's what pushed me into doing the immigration consultant program. So that's then how I became duly licensed.
So, how does that all work? I know now I think you probably got in just before all the changes there, but can you sort of explain what happens for paralegals in immigration and why you had to go to get an immigration consultant program and get the RCIC designation?
Sure. Yeah. So as a paralegal, you are allowed to, I will say as of today, because there are a lot of changes happening, but as of today, you're allowed to represent clients at a tribunal. So the Immigration and Refugee Board is a tribunal, and that's where all the immigration litigation takes place. So you're able to do that, but as a paralegal, you're not allowed to do the immigration applications. So you can't do anything leading up to the litigation part. So in order to be able to do the immigration applications and work with individuals who want to move to Canada, you have to either become a lawyer and you represent them that way, or you can be an immigration consultant. So as an immigration consultant, you can do the paperwork and you can represent them at the tribunal. However, there are a lot of changes that are being made. So I guess I'll start with the education. So the immigration consultant program used to be offered, I believe it was 11 colleges and universities across Canada. And you would enroll, do your, it's about 2 years. You would do your program, you would do your 3-hour exam, and then become regulated. Now they're changing a lot of the requirements with the immigration consultant profession. So it's no longer going to be governed by a council. It's switching over to a college. There's no more 11 colleges and universities across Canada offering the program. It's only offered at Queen's University for the English course, and then you can go to McGill for the French course. So yeah, there's a lot of changes that have kind of came about as I was graduating and finishing up. So I graduated from Humber, and I just kind of got in before the changeover to Queen's and McGill. And another change that's happening is with the tribunals. So if you do want to represent an individual at the IRB, I believe it's, I don't actually know exactly when the change is occurring, but as a paralegal or as an immigration consultant, if you want to do work at the IRB, there's actually another course you have to take in order to be able to do that. So regardless if you're a paralegal paralegals are able to represent clients at any tribunal, you now as a paralegal still have to do this extra course. As well as if you're an immigration consultant. I just finished all the classes. I graduated August 2020, and I would still have to go back and complete those extra courses in order to be able to represent clients at the tribunal. And personally, I think it's a really great upgrade and an extra requirement to the immigration consultant profession. I know when I completed the program at Humber, it was not enough training or information in order to properly represent someone at a tribunal. Even with my education as a paralegal, yes, we can do tribunals, but it's not focused towards immigration law, which is a very people specialize in immigration law for a reason. It's so diverse. So I personally think it's a great change, and I'm happy that they're making it.
Now, so how you found in terms of the pandemic and, after getting your license there, what have you found in the last year in your practice, especially kind of going more focused into immigration? Anything different than when you were working in immigration before, what it was, going into the office there? What have you found? Is it the same thing? I mean, because largely, you may have clients from all over the world. What's the same? What's different?
Yeah, I feel like it, for me and my experience with it, it really is the same. So when I was working in Toronto for a year in immigration law at an immigration law firm, it was all remote. Like all of our clients were overseas. Yes, we had clients in Canada, but they would never come to our office. So while I did have to go into work every day to, complete the applications and do my job, I could have done it from home. So switching over to doing it on my own and doing it remotely, from my point of view, it hasn't really changed. It's one of the great things about immigration law is that it is very heavily relied on technology, because there's a border in between you and your clients. So for me, there hasn't been too much of a change.
Okay, with that, maybe you can kind of explain some of the different things you do in immigration. I know there's many, many different types of applications, but maybe you can kind of summarize there for students who pretty much don't have any. No, we haven't gotten to immigration law yet, so maybe you can kind of explain the different things that they can get into.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with what I do. So I offer legal outsourcing services, which means I am a independent contractor that works with other licensed professionals, helping them with their caseload. They remain the representative on record, and I just help them with their cases. And that's mostly been with immigration law and immigration lawyers. I also do immigration representation, which is actually doing the paperwork and being the representative on record. And then I also do immigration coaching. So this is something that's really new within the last couple of months that I'm offering. So I find with immigration, and I say maybe even more generally with the legal industry, a lot of people think that there's only two options. You either hire a lawyer and they will take care of it for you. I use quotations for that. Or you self-represent, you do it on your own, and you try to do the best you can. And I feel like there's such a gap there. For one, paralegals are individuals that can represent you. I mean, not regarding immigration, but just generally speaking in the legal industry, they can. And not a lot of people know about paralegals and paralegal profession. But also, there is an in between when it comes to hiring someone to do it for you versus doing it yourself. And that's when I came up with immigration coaching. So say you're an individual that really wants to do their application on their own, but they just have some questions, or they're just not confident with submitting the application on their own, and they want someone to review it first who has experience. That's immigration coaching. That's what I offer. So you send me your application, tell me the questions that you have, and send me your application. I'll do a full review, and I'll let you know if there's forms missing, if there's gaps, if there's maybe errors that you're not even aware of. And it just gives you that extra confidence on being able to submit that application. And then kind of flipping over to, immigration law and what is immigration law. So essentially, individuals can come to Canada as a temporary resident, so like a visitor, a student, a worker. You can be a permanent resident, or you can be a citizenship. Or you can have citizenship and be a citizen. So when I was working in Toronto, it was mostly temporary work permit applications. That's the majority of the work that I did. When I started working as a freelancer, August 2020, I am working with other law firms and their caseload. I was mostly doing permanent residency applications, which was really exciting because that wasn't something that I have really touched on before. And now, as I have my own practice, I'm really willing to help individuals with anything they need regarding immigration. So citizenship, permanent residency, study permits, really anything under the sun, I'm happy to help with.
Perfect. So let's talk about that. I mean, I think a lot of paralegals, and maybe when you went to school, and same with lawyers as well, as we learn a lot about the theory. We don't necessarily learn about setting up a practice and making things work. And I mean, I have a similar sort of cookie cutter approach, right? Because do a little teaching, you do this, you do that. So maybe you could tell us a bit about with and I believe I've had Erin Cowling on before there. So you can maybe tell me about how all that works in terms of providing those support services. Because again, I think a lot of students, even in the past, but certainly now, don't turn their mind to, well, you don't just need to go and work in a firm or start your own firm and get your own clients. So maybe you can kind of tell a little bit more about what you do there and how it all works.
Yeah. So I came across freelancing, like you said, with Erin. So she owns a company called Flex Legal. And basically, it's a network of freelancers. You contact Flex Legal. You say, hey, I have this project, or I have this case I need help with. And then she matches a freelancer with that project. So when I was in between, I wasn't an RCIC yet. I was a licensed paralegal. I was newly unemployed, and I really wanted to get into immigration law. I thought, why don't I do freelancing and just help other lawyers with their practices? And the amount of knowledge that I gained from doing that as a business owner really helped me set up for what I then did a couple months ago, which is opening up my own practice. So as a freelancer, it's a little bit, it's not as intense because you're not the representative on record. They are staying on top of the identification, client intake, and you really just get into the thick of it with the file. But as a freelancer, you still have to invoice, you still have to stay on top of your bookkeeping. And I would say, like, if anything, I would recommend freelancing first before you open up your own practice, because it gives you really good experience, and you're able to work in your field with different law firms. So instead of just working with one law firm as an employee, you're now an independent contractor working with 5, 6, 7 law firms, and you're seeing the different ways that they're dealing with their clients, and how they do record keeping and how they take on certain legal issues. So if anything, I would recommend it. If you're thinking of going solo, try out freelancing first.
Okay, and then you kind of have that, you get that knowledge, and you said, 2 months ago, you're like, okay, now I'm ready to have my own clients and still keep that freelancing, but now I can build on top of it with my own clients. So what kind of goes into making that leap forward? I think, again, we have like, a practice management class and you learn about accounting and all that, but what have you found then in making that transition? Now you're no longer just freelancing, but you also have your own clients, or, getting all of that set up. What did you learn from that experience, and what can you share with students?
Yeah, so I guess to start, definitely keep your textbooks. I went back to my textbooks. We had to take a small business class, and I used that textbook. We had to make a business plan as part of the class, and I went back to that business plan and started rejigging it. So yeah, I would say definitely you will use the tools that you were given in school to open up your practice. And when I was in school, I wasn't planning on opening up my own practice. That, like, during that course, I was like, I'm never going to use this. So I'm so grateful I kept everything, because then I was able to go back to it. And then when it comes to going from a freelancer to actually being the representative on record, it's a lot of little things, but manageable things. So setting up your insurance, setting up the bank accounts, setting up the trust accounts, making sure your message is coming across clearly on a website, on LinkedIn, if you have Facebook, on Facebook. And another big change is that you're no longer doing B2B, so business to business. You're looking for clients, which I find is much more difficult than B2B, because with business to business work, you kind of almost have like a constant flow of work coming in, because they're the ones that are doing the hustle on getting clients. So they're like, here's the project, go. Where when you have your own practice, you now have to do that extra marketing, do the sales. And, once you're finished an immigration application, you have to find another individual to do another immigration application. So I'm learning it's a bit more of a hustle in order to get clients. But I'm really grateful that I made the decision to kind of blend everything together in my practice, doing the legal outsourcing, paralegal services, immigration representation, and immigration coaching, because it's giving me a diverse book of business, and it's giving me the ability to kind of relax a bit on the fact that I don't have clients, streaming in looking for help when it comes to like the clients regarding immigration and their specific case.
So one of the things that you'll have, whether it's your own clients, and certainly when you are doing freelance work, and I got to segue this in because it is the first day of legal research and writing. And I know I saw you had this post about, one of the services there, right, is doing the research and writing memos. So maybe so then for benefit for the students here who are ready to get started and learn about all of that, what kind of goes into your preparation there when you either are given a scenario, maybe in freelancing, they ask you, Rebecca, can you look into this issue here that we're having, let's say with I don't know, a spousal sponsorship application. They don't believe it's a genuine relationship. What can we find? Is there any good case law? What goes into your preparation for that lawyer, or even if it was a client of your own?
Yeah. So, great question. I would say first I go to Google, because you never know what you can find there. And I find if I start there, it helps me understand the basis. Because if you jump right into, say, like CanLee or Westlaw, it can be overwhelming and you don't know how to articulate and like break it down break down the legal jargon of it all. So to be honest, I go to Google first. A lot of people write really good blog posts. A lot of law firms have a blog, and they'll break it down for you. And they might mention a case or two, and then that's when you can dive into looking at case law. Another great resource is the Canada.ca website, the government website. They are you have to know how to navigate through it. There's a lot of web pages, there's a lot of information on there, but it will give you the tools you need if you're trying to figure out, okay, like what forms do I need for this application, or what are the documents that I need. Like they do lay it out for you. And so I would say it's a bit of mixture of both. And once I do have the answer that I'm looking for, I make sure that I keep record of it in some way. So I have a very large bookmark list on my Google page that, you know, I can quickly go to. I have the links. I have Word documents that have specific links for certain applications. So citizenship, I have my links where I can go to get the forms that I need, to get the document checklist that I need. And maybe if there's a good blog or two that really broke it down for me, I'll save those links as well. So it's a little bit of everything, and just trying to figure out, you know, what works best for you and your research style. I find using links really helps me.
Okay, let's so kind of continue on there. So you got all these links, you got all this information, and maybe this goes even back to when you were a student and you had probably the same legal research and writing class there. How do you get all that and organize it? Again, everyone has their own ways, but get all that information, and now you got to put together a memo to whoever you need to send it off to about that. So what sort of has helped you, either as a student or now as a practitioner, to take all of that information and distill it to what you need to get out to either respond to a client or respond to the lawyer that you are working with?
Yeah, another great question. I would say, if I'm creating a memo for a client, it's very different than a memo for a lawyer. I assume the lawyer has touched on this before, understands legal jargon, knows the links, that sort of thing. So I might kind of cut to the chase with them, and it might be a bit shorter. Where if I'm working with a client, I assume that they know nothing about the immigration process. So I start from the beginning. So, if this, then that. If you're looking to be a citizen, you have to meet these residential requirements, and I will include links in those memos. So I find the memos that I would send to, or the communication that I would send to a client who's looking for help with their case, I really try to break it down and stay away from the legal jargon. It can be it can make things more complicated than it has to be when you're using all these big words that people just don't understand, or these concepts that people have never heard of before. So I try to stay away from that and make it really approachable. And and make it so if you look at that document for the first time, you can follow through and you didn't really need to read anything else before you got to that memo. It's just something that you can click open, read, and you understand the full process. Compared to if I was working with a lawyer and creating a memo for a lawyer, I would assume they already know all that stuff. So I would really cut to the chase on what the specific question is and what we need to do to action and resolve that issue.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, thanks for pointing out. Obviously, it's a communication. You're not going to be sending your legal memos up to your client. You'll have a nice maybe reporting letter or an opinion letter or whatever you're drafting there again for the audience. Any other just writing tips there that you found in terms of legal writing versus obviously just ordinary writing? Have you noticed? I mean, in terms of your different education, they're going from what you studied in your bachelor program there versus your paralegal program versus the RCIC, or sorry, the immigration consultant program at Humber. I mean, anything that has changed there that in terms of in your education there that you find different now? Like, hey, when I look at some of my writing when I was a student here, completely different than when I was a student here, completely different to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I would say a big change that I have implemented is giving myself time. So as a student, as a undergrad student, I was okay with kind of leaving things to the last minute. I kind of liked the stress of it and being able to hammer it out in 1 or 2 days. Where I find when you're dealing with law, there's so many variables that you have to give yourself time. So don't rush looking through the research. Don't try to find that quick answer. You have to really give yourself that time in order to soak it all in. And when it comes to writing, I find I need to take a day in between when I like something. If I'm doing like a large memo, I need to take a day, walk away from it, and reread it after I sleep. Because I find all of a sudden, like I know what I was saying in that memo, but to someone who's looking at it for the first time, they won't understand the jump that I've made or what I'm referencing. Because I know what I'm talking about in my head, but I haven't explained how I made that conclusion. So I might add an extra couple sentences connecting the dots in between those two thoughts. So I would say that's the biggest difference between, how I was as a student and how I am now is I really try to give myself some time to walk away from it. And if I don't have time, if I do have to just kind of hammer it out, usually that would be in like a quick email um, or maybe just like a point form note or starting a submission letter. I will make a note that like this is rough. This is a rough draft. This is a very rough first draft. Let me know if you'd like something more formal. And that's when I will take the time to really dive into it and explain everything that I'm talking about.
Thanks for sharing that. And as well, I mean, we were talking, you were mentioning your legal coaching or immigration coaching and something different there. And I think, spell unbundled legal services, as we were talking about. One of the big things for paralegals and even lawyers and immigration consultants, I mean, anyone in the legal field, is providing access to justice, right? And again, you mentioned how a lot of people think it's either, you get this lawyer and they take care of everything, and or I'm going to do it on my own. So can you maybe share a little bit about how that's going and what how you can break up? You can pick any kind of immigration matter, but how you can break up to what specifically you can do in an unbundled service and in terms of coaching for a client that you don't necessarily need to take on the entirety of the matter.
Yeah. So I personally really like unbundled services because a lot of people, they understand what's going on with their case. They understand what needs to be done. And they might not have the tools or like the information they need to like get to the next step. So with immigration, they may, know the forms that they need to fill out, and they filled out all the forms. And they know, how to submit it, but they didn't know about the submission letter and like what goes into a submission letter, or they didn't know that they have to explain certain things, like if there's a gap in their resume, or if they have done a lot of traveling, they have to kind of explain the story of like why they traveled and what happened. Or if they, what's another example? Say they have immigration status that maybe was expired, but they were in implied or what's now called maintained status because they had applied for another application to renew their status. So all these little things, you need to explain it. You need to really lay it out for the immigration officer as to why your application is the way it is. So going online, you might just see, oh, I just need to fill out these forms. I submitted, I'm good to go. But there's more of like a story to it. And I find with immigration coaching, that's something that I can really help with is, okay, you've done, the bones of it, but now let's put a nice bow on it to send it in to hopefully to make sure that you have the best chances possible in order to get it approved. When it comes to the paralegal services and like unbundled services, I'll do legal research, legal opinions, sometimes document review. And again, it's not like I'm helping them through the whole process. I'm just answering that one specific question, or I'm helping them with that one issue that they're having. And some people do want full representation, and that's great too. They don't understand it, or they don't have the time to understand it, or they're overwhelmed by the situation and they don't want to take it on their own. They need someone that can walk them through every step, and that's great too. So it really boils down to who you are and what kind of support are you looking for, because at the end of the day, you're hiring a legal representative to help you with your case, right? So you're calling the shots, you're telling them what you need to be, what needs to be done. So it really boils down to, what are you looking for from your legal representative?
And then in terms of that, that flexibility there, obviously, if they need more, then you can drop
Mhm.
an agreement, right? And say, now I can, this is going to cover this next step, or if you want to keep doing it in
Yeah.
stages, or if you want to say, okay, I'll take on the rest of the matter all the way through to the um, immigration refugee board if need be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's another great thing about the unbundled services, that you can always add more. It doesn't have to stop there. I mean, the agreement that we have written out will say, I'm just helping you with this specific issue or this specific contract review. Or the specific, immigration review, just this one time session of reviewing your application. But absolutely, you can add more to it. Say I did the immigration review and I noticed, a ton of issues, and maybe you should have a more detailed submission letter, explanation letter sent in. Then we can add to it. So I find some people can start with immigration coaching, see how it goes, and then you can move over to the representation, and then I can file it on your behalf.
I guess that with unbundled services, and that there's, in terms of the clarity there to the client, that I'm only doing this. How do you avoid, if you're not able to do something in addition, like we just talked about, how do you say, okay, look, this is what I can do, and this is all I can do, and you need to go to
Mhm.
somebody else, or a lawyer, or another consultant, or a
Yeah.
paralegal? How do you kind of avoid the client wanting more without getting into another retainer agreement?
Yeah. So I try to stay as open and transparent as possible about my services. So I actually, this is it's funny that this happened today. So I actually had a client who sent me a contract that he needed reviewing, and I did the review. But I said, if you're wanting to sign this contract, because he was kind of on the fence, if you're actually wanting to sign this contract, you need to get a U.S. attorney. It wasn't a Canadian attorney. He needed a US attorney in order to sign that contract. So I find if I'm transparent about what I can and cannot do, and I say, look, like this is where you need to go. Sometimes that's not me. Sometimes I can't help you with everything in that case, because I'm not a lawyer in Canada. I'm not an attorney in the United States. I'm a paralegal and an immigration consultant, and I have a line on where I need to stop, really for my liability, and also to make sure that they're getting the best representation that they deserve. So I find for me it's relatively simple, and it's an easy exercise for me to say, like, hey, I just can't do that, but this is where you need to go, and I'll send them in the right direction.
Okay, so I see here about we were talking about making the decision there, and we were talking about sort of all that goes into it, and going to your old books and everything. Now, looking, so it's only been a couple of months. What have you learned in the last 2 months? Now, if you can go back 2 months ago and say, here's what I want to do a little bit differently, is there anything that you found that you didn't realize when you go out on your own versus when you were just freelancing?
Yeah, staying on top of your books. I can say that you can set up your accounting the best way that you can. But when things get busy, you will soon find all the little errors and the things that you should have done differently. And I'm finding that, and I'm actually going back to my accounting books to make sure, that I'm doing my record keeping the right way, that I'm staying on top of my, bank reconciliations, and making sure that I have all my documents in order in the event that I get an audit. Cause that could happen, overnight. All of a sudden you have an audit. And if you don't stay on top of it, that can take a lot of time to be able to answer to that audit. And what I'm trying to stay on top of is my book. So that way, if I were to get an audit today, it would take me no time. I would just be able to send what they ask for and be done with it. And it wouldn't change anything that's going on in my practice or the day-to-day tasks that I need to do. So I'm working towards that goal. I feel like I'm there. I'm almost there. Maybe another solid day of just making sure that I have everything recorded the proper way, and I would be good. But I think there's that extra level of fear almost when it comes to having your own practice and being that representative on record. Because now I'm not relying on I'm not expecting the law firms I'm working with to take care of that. It's now on me. So I just really try to stay on top of that. And I think, a couple months ago, if I maybe just spend an extra few hours doing research or looking at those textbooks to set it up the right way, I wouldn't have to go back later and kind of rejig some things.
Now, we were talking before about, there's not much change in terms of immigration. Your clients would be somewhere else on the other side of the world, or, even if they were in Canada, very rare for them to come in. But in terms of maybe even on the freelancing, where you might get an email of specifics, how do you find in terms of working remotely, and whether it is even for the clients, even if you're not physically meeting them or would have been physically meeting them, how do you find kind of managing things, doing that remotely, especially with the the freelancing side, where you may have a task? Is it fine to just communicate through emails back and forth, or do you have Zoom and stuff like that, or is it Zoom fatigue is kicked in now in 2021? What is that?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah. So I definitely still Zoom with my clients. I want to meet with them and at least, have that conversation. I find people can kind of hide behind emails, and you don't really see the person other side after a while. So I do try to keep up those Zoom calls. But I would say the majority of my communication with my clients is either through email or phone calls. Like they will literally just call me and say, hey, like this is what I need, or this is what, is coming up. I try to stay away from WhatsApp or text messages. And the reason for that is that I want to keep a record of the communications that I'm having, not only to go back to later if something were, to go wrong, but also just to stay on top of how the case is progressing or what's going on with the project. So if I do have a phone call, usually what I like to do is, shortly after, just send a really quick email, as per our discussion, this is what I'm going to be doing today. It was great chatting with you. Thanks so much. And I do try to keep it as recorded as possible, because if you get into WhatsApp or text messages, it's very easy to send messages, which is great, but there's also the con of it, which is it's so easy to send a message that there's a ton of communication that's going back and forth, and you might not stay on top of, what did they tell me? When was it? What were they looking for? When did they send me those instructions? And I find you can get lost in all those messages, where with email, you can easily search that specific term, or, about when that date was. So you can just scroll to that date. And it helps me stay on top of the communication and the file and the progression of that file.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's especially how easy it is to have 20 messages back and forth, and
Yeah.
and then an hour or 3 hours later you get a response to something, and then again, it's always have to make sure you're keeping those records there in case the client got a idea that you were going to do something, and all they have is this text message or WhatsApp message to confirm that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
What else in terms of client communication? I mean, one of the things I teach my students here, obviously, is that the most things that uh, clients complain about to the law society, it's not about something. It's always about the lack of communication. We were just talking about communication there. So how do you kind of find that balance between being able to tell them what's going on, but at the same time, that they're not calling you or texting you or sending you a message on WhatsApp at 3 a.m. wanting to know what's going on with their file? And because again, 3 a.m. here is
Yeah.
8 o'clock somewhere else in the world, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I try to stay very open about my availability. So one of the things I do with legal outsourcing is that I'll do a daily rate. So instead of it being like a project flat rate or an hourly rate, I'll do a daily rate. So I work with that firm remotely for the whole day. We'll be doing, emails back and forth, a few phone calls here and there, and just, hammering it that day. And I find if I am going to do a daily rate with a lawyer, I try to let other lawyers know. So that way they're aware that I'm not going to be around that day to answer their questions. Because, if they hired me for a daily rate, booked me for a day, they wouldn't want me answering other firms' emails and questions and stuff. So I try to stay focused on that one client. And again, I just stay open about my availability. Hey, I'm not going to be here this week. This is what's happening. I'm fine sending out, an email, just BCCing everyone. Hey, just so you know, next week, I'm not going to be available on this day, but I'll get back to my emails as soon as possible. And I find that I've actually had, knock on wood, I haven't had any big issues with communication. I find the law firms I work with really respect my time. I respect their time. The clients that I've worked with so far, again, knock on wood, they really respect my time. And they're like, thank you so much for getting back to me so quickly. I try to get back to emails as soon as possible. I don't like waiting long periods of time to get a response. So I try to, even if I just say like, hey, received, I'll get back to that tomorrow. Just something. So that way they're aware that I've acknowledged their request or their email and that I will get to it. Because yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things when you really get going and you have a ton of clients on the go, is that, how do you stay connected with all of them? And it doesn't have to be, long emails, long phone calls. It can just be a quick message like, I will get back to you by the end of this week, or I will get back to you tomorrow. And just giving that, reassurance that you're there and you're there to help them. You're just busy with something else right now.
perfect. Now, one of the things I think we touched on it, in terms of when you have your own practice, it's more than just the practice of law, right? We talked about accounting and books and all of that. Now, one of the things, that I think maybe it was just 2 days ago, I just saw a post and I said, let me reach out to Rebecca there. So it's about, your presence in terms of whether it's social media or marketing, whether online or, through traditional, let's say, methods, with the business cards and things like that. What have you found and learned, and how do you kind of organize all that and find the time to do that? Or is that something that, you have people to assist you with?
Yeah. So great question. I got a coach actually through the Law Society. So it's the short forms I can't think of the word at the moment, but they basically offer the service where if you're licensed, you can have a coach. So I signed up to have a coach. I believe we did 5 sessions. And that was one of the things we talked about, was how do you manage your time and how do you stay on top of projects? And I told them that, for example, the website that I created it all on my own. I didn't have any other assistance. And it took me a lot of time. And I said, I just can't wait for this website to be done so I can, move on to other things. And he said, well, why don't you just acknowledge the fact that like, it may never be perfect. You can make revisions later and just get it to the best point that you can get it to, and then move on. And I've kind of used that advice over to other things. So, for example, my bookkeeping, I try to stay on top of it as best as I can. I'm going to try to keep it as perfect as possible, but sometimes that won't happen within one day. Sometimes it has to, make a note to go back to it tomorrow. And so I find that being able to acknowledge the fact that it may never be perfect, but I will do the best I can to get it almost there, has really helped me with time and managing it all. And for example, like social media, I could have a full-time job doing social media, writing blog posts and doing LinkedIn posts and Twitter and everything. And I just have to acknowledge that I don't have the time to post every day. Some people can, and that's great. And that's just not something that I can do right now. It's another reason why I don't have a Facebook account. I am aware that I do need Facebook because that's a big platform in order to get clients, and a lot of people will go to Facebook for information. But as it stands right now, like I don't have a Facebook account because I just don't have the time to manage another platform. And so with that being said, I focus in just on mainly two. So LinkedIn and Instagram is where I focus my time on for posting and marketing. And I find that's working well. And I think once I get to a point where I really can't stay on top of it is when I know that I need to start hiring out. And that's a great problem to have is the need to hire someone to get something done. And I'm not quite there yet, but I'm definitely getting to a point where I'm looking at the options of, okay, when will I want to hire someone? And if I were to hire someone, what would they take over? So I definitely think it's a learning curve for sure, trying to manage everything and just trying to acknowledge that you can't do everything perfectly, but you can try to do everything to the best of your ability. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Now, with that, maybe you can share anything in terms of using LinkedIn, for example. I think it's a little different, obviously. Whereas before, you can go and have like a cup of coffee. Well, I guess now you can, but earlier in the pandemic, you couldn't. Maybe still some people, you can't really have a good conversation. Where you might be wearing masks and stuff like that. But what, in terms of approaching, in terms of networking and using platforms like LinkedIn, has worked for you and kind of through the freelancing stage there and now in terms of connecting with, I mean, and it's great, and it's the coach advisory network, if I forget the CAN there, that's great resources from the Law Society. So what have you found in terms of using that in terms of building your network?
So I find that with LinkedIn, it's a great platform, and I feel like I could be utilizing it even more. I find when I reach out to someone and I say, hey, like I really like your post, or your business really intrigues me. You get a quick response. And I either will, like with freelancing or legal outsourcing, I'll find a company online or, just through LinkedIn, I'll message the founder and I'll just be like, hey, like I would love to have a conversation. And going back from the beginning with Flex Legal, that's how that started. Was I just reached out and I said, hey, your company really intrigues me and I'm really interested in everything that you're doing. Would you be open to having like a phone call? And I remember there was another podcast that you had. I forget the individual. I want to say his name was Josh, but I might have it wrong. And he said, like, what's the worst thing that can happen when you reach out to someone? They will just say no. Like, that's it. They'll just say no. And like, that's not a scary thing to have happen. So why not just reach out? So I feel like with LinkedIn, it's given me this opportunity to really connect with all these different legal professionals and to be able to read their posts and read their blogs. And I think it's a great platform. And then with LinkedIn or with Instagram on the other side, I don't know how many clients I get through LinkedIn, but I do know that as a business, people will look you up on LinkedIn. So you should have it there. I think maybe one person has reached out to me through LinkedIn saying that they saw my posts. So right now, what I've been relying on is LinkedIn and word of mouth. I find that a lot of connections that I'm making are still just from word of mouth and friends of friends or colleagues that I've worked with in the past. And you really should utilize that as well. COVID or not, staying connected with people that you've worked with is really valuable, and you can learn so much from them, or they can send you a lead, or you can send them a lead. And I think it's important with networking as well.
And I believe it would have been Josh Calderon. Actually, I just saw a post of
Okay.
his just now. Sounds probably something that he would say. But again, I think that's like what's the worst that can happen is they say no, and you move on to the next person.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I think the other thing that we've talked quite a bit with a number of our guests is especially those who have their own practices. How do you find time for Rebecca, right? How do you take care of your own mental health? What do you do? And certainly, the importance there of addressing that. I mean, it's again a lot of demand on a practice where essentially you might have to be working 24/7 or available potentially 24/7 if something were to happen. All hands on deck, your hands being the only hands there, right? So what have you found in terms of kind of managing everything, especially as you've transitioned into establishing your own practice there, and what do you do?
Yeah, it's a really great question and very relevant, during COVID and talking about mental health. I think for me, it's really important to get outside. At least once a day. Where my mailbox is, it's about a 10-minute walk there and a 10-minute walk back. I live in a rural area, and I find sometimes I need to do that in the middle of the day just to get outside, step away from my computer. And I find that really helps. And protecting my weekends, I think, is a really important one as well. Sometimes Monday to Friday, it comes and goes so quickly, and it comes Friday and you're like, my God, like I got so much done this week. And like, I really hammered it hard this week. And like, I just need a couple of days to like regroup. And going back to my student days, I was a student and I worked the whole time I was in school. So my weekends were for work and my weekdays were for school, and I never got that break. And looking at my mental health then versus now, I'm aware that I need to stay on top of having days off. Being productive doesn't mean, going to work or doing your schoolwork for that day. There's other ways to be productive. Cleaning your house, all the other little things that you have to do. Relaxing is important. But I find those are my two big things: making sure I get outside and making sure that I protect my weekends, and that I don't look at my email. I try to not log on to anything or look up anything. And really just be mindful of the fact that, I can make a list throughout the weekend. I might make a list of things. Oh, I need to do that on Monday. I need to do this on Monday, but I try not to like go ahead and do it. And I think that really helps. And being mindful also of what works best for you. So maybe, walking outside isn't for everyone, but maybe like going to the gym or, going out with your friends or socializing. I think with COVID, I've kind of learned to do things that I can do on my own. And for example, like going for walks. But I think it's kind of to each their own, and whatever you need to do to decompress, but just make sure you're taking time to decompress is really important.
Okay, perfect. So Rebecca, thank you so much for taking the time here, joining us, sharing about all the different things there. Perhaps if I know you just gave some really valuable advice right there, but any final words of wisdom to my students or anyone else listening about getting into the practice and transitioning from being students to being practitioners, whether it's in immigration, whether it's in as paralegals, what can you share? And thanks again for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I've thought a bit about this question because I've seen that you've asked this question to other people. And my advice would be is to dream big. When I first became a paralegal, I never thought about opening up my own practice, and now I'm doing it. And I think the society that we're in, especially in the legal industry, there can be a lot of roadblocks, and um, there can be a lot of people telling you no. And I think to be very mindful of the fact that you can dream big. You can achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. You just have to make it a priority and put in the work. And if you feel like something has gone wrong or maybe you failed, like take that as a lesson and learn from it and move on and still dream big. I had a teacher that told us that if you see a job posting and you don't meet the qualifications, to apply for it anyways. Let them tell you no. And I've always remembered that. And I've gone ahead and I've applied for jobs and I've gotten jobs that I didn't meet all the qualifications. And it really goes, as I've progressed in my career, I've realized that I need to keep on doing that for myself. I shouldn't be saying no to me. Other people can tell me no, but I should just keep on going. Dream big, realize that your potential is much bigger than you think it is, and just go for it. And if you fail, that's okay. You'll learn from it. You'll pick up and you will move on. And down the road, you won't see it as that big of a deal. So just dream big.
Perfect. Yeah, great couple words there to wrap up on. And thanks again, Rebecca, for joining us. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Hopefully see you again tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Take care, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.